the network and the centralization of the state. The network state is the re-centralization. Go ahead.
Balaji, I'm a little rusty on my Hobbes, but it's like also baked into the Leviathan concept is this concept that has been, I guess, core to the nation state principle of a monopoly on violence. And
Well,
I'm
this
curious
is
what
why
you
the
think about.
Leviathan is holding a sword.
This is why
That's
the
what that
Leviathan in the
represents.
picture was holding a sword, and of course,
Yes.
crypto is very much a nonviolent movement. But there are these world coordination problems, right? Like we can't have slaughter bots going out in the wild, or like
Sure.
bioweapons, right? Some network state comes up with this incredible bioweapon, and it just doesn't just affect the network state; it affects the entire world. And so, how do we rein
Sure.
that in? Ultimately, the sword, the monopoly on violence. What is the role for violence in the network
Great
state
question.
as a settlement layer, if you will?
Extremely good question. And the thing about this is, just to preface it, like, I want to just identify a certain catch-22. If you don't discuss violence and war and so on in this, then people will say, oh, you're hopelessly naive, pie in the sky, et cetera, et cetera. If you do discuss it in exacting detail, they're like, this guy's like a tech warlord. Oh my God, right?
Yeah, I can
you
see
know,
that.
he wants to drone,
Yeah.
right? So there's a bit of a catch-22 there. So I just want to first identify that, right? And then propose a kind of a somewhat different framing on the thing, which is the way we think about the military and force and so on, it just changes completely online. Okay, it's as different as imagine firing a gun underwater. It just doesn't work, right? And like all the tanks and the planes and the nukes and stuff, they don't work in the cloud in the same way. They don't work on the internet, right? You cannot just hit a button and bomb Bitcoin or Ethereum. It just, you'd have to bomb, if you go back to the network state image. So think about something like this. One of the things that I took from Bitcoin and Ethereum was the concept of physical decentralization as a core part, because the internet makes it possible to network enclaves. Little pieces of territory before the internet that were all spread out around the world were not that valuable. Like if you had a little drip here and a little drip here, but now they are valuable because you can network them together.
Right.
And it's almost like, just somebody who's in Hawaii thinking of themselves as part of the US, someone who's a town over here thinks of themselves as part of the same, network over here, right? Okay. So when you've got something like this that's physically decentralized, think about just logistically what it would mean to bomb something like that. First, you'd have to find all the nodes. That itself is non-trivial because a network state or network archipelago or network, society, it doesn't need to make all of them public. It doesn't, in fact, need to make any of them public. It can still prove its population and annual income in square meters. Why? Through some combination of zero-knowledge proofs and crypto oracles, right? So it can prove how big it is while proving only that. And you can put that proof. You'll still have to trust the crypto oracles, or you'll have to more generally some trust model for the crypto oracles, meaning you have some probability that this particular crypto oracle is misreporting, and you've got some independent check. They reported it was 1,000 square meters. We resampled, 50 of their properties. They're 950 square meters most of the time. They're somewhat overestimating, but not by a huge amount, right? You have some model for the crypto oracles reliability. You can frame it as an estimation problem of how reliable they are. The point being that this society does not need to give away its entire position, okay? It can be something that is new, a secret state, an encrypted state, because the network that underpins the state, that overpins the state, is itself secret. Is that cool?
This is so cool. I mean, I guess it lends a hand to the incredible prospect that maybe we can create the state in a way that doesn't require violence. And I'm not aware in the trajectory of humanity of a time we've actually been able to do that. We've always used...
There's a couple.
Maybe we...
Arguably.
I'd like to hear that, but like we've used violence as kind of the settlement layer.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about crypto is we have created this property rights system in Bitcoin, Ethereum, and others that can settle disputes, can settle one asset goes to the another place, can enforce property rights without violence. And so while it does seem a little pie in the sky, and I'm skeptical that the network state will lead to less violence in the world, at the same time, we see the examples of Ethereum and Bitcoin, which are a property rights system that is enforced in nonviolent ways. And maybe that is a hopeful prospect that we can actually achieve this. But yeah,
Well,
comment on this.
just as we were talking about the banking layer needing a foundation to stand on, if we want to make network states that are nonviolent at their core, they need to have this nonviolent foundation to stand on. And Bitcoin and Ethereum, they have their own armies, if you will. It's the proof of work miners for Bitcoin, and in the future, very soon, the stakers for Ethereum. Offering, and Ryan, if you want to share the Leviathan picture that I sent you, this is an art, and Balaji, this is why like you and I have thought about a lot about this. This is a Leviathan picture that I put together forever ago to illustrate the bankless DAO, and I've edited out, I photoshopped out the sword, and I've replaced it with the bank token, as in it's an incentive only structure. As in, there is no like physical enforcement by the DAO. There is only an incentive structure. Now, this might change when we actually instantiate the bankless DAO somewhere physically in the world. But when we have are born on top of these like networks like Bitcoin, Ethereum, that are inherently don't have any armies or any physical capacities, and then we also form DAOs, which same don't have any armies or physical capacities, but they are still organizing people under a code of values, of morals, in like the same shared space. And as you said, like these meetups that are birthed in physical space and then they dissipate back into the cloud. For a long time, these things will only be able to have incentive only, carrot only incentive structures, as opposed to incentive structures with the stick, which is why the Leviathan has a sword. It's meant to represent a punishment only incentive structure. Are we tracking here?
Yes. Yep. And I think like the transition, obviously, from that guy has a fish, let me bash his head and take that fish, to that guy has a fish, let me trade him for something, was violence reducing, right? Like, trade is a very important technology. Animals don't have it, right? Like animals don't have, someone is eating something, they just go and kill that thing to eat the thing instead, right? It's very zero sum. So gains from trades very insanely abstract. So that shows there's some proof of principle. Also, the fact that Ethereum and Bitcoin have, for the most part, gotten to whatever hundreds of billions, basically without much violence at all, at least within the protocol. Obviously there's people, folks have been mugged or whatever for it offline, but relative to what they are, give a proof point. Coming back to this thing, you guys know why the internet was originally developed?
Is the DARPA stuff sort of?
Yeah. Why?
Something to do with the military, Balaji. I can't.
Yeah. To retain communications in the event of a nuclear strike.
That's right. This is right. Yes.
Right. Now, unfortunately, and I don't want to sound flip about this, what's old may become new again, right? Because like there's more probability, I think, of a nuclear exchange than, we're flirting with that, right? When you're talking about like Russia and China and hot wars and crazy things happening, you're just rolling the dice on something that you don't want to roll the dice on. And the people who set up this whole system of deterrence and whatnot are now long since gone. And a lot of people have inherited and have fingers on a button that they could never have built in the first place, right? So the thing is that if you look at that map, can you nuke a network state or a network archipelago or a startup society? It's actually pretty hard to do. You'd cause, you see, that's the thing is imagine a gun that didn't have targeting, right? If you pulled, it might shoot, the guy next to you rather than the guy in front of you. That's not a good weapon, right? It's not something where the use of force is targeted and proportionate and controllable and so on and so forth. People don't usually think of it this way, but like more is not always better. For example, the Soviets had something called the Tsar Bomba. It was this gigantic nuclear weapon. It could have like blown up all of, Western Europe or something like that. But it wasn't useful as a political tool because their goal was, basically to convert people to communism, not genocide them. Maybe after they convert them to communism, then they genocide them, okay? But they weren't admitting it like that. They thought they were going and doing a good thing, comrade, right? And moreover, on the other side, if you just nuke something and it's all glass, then, what's like, there's nothing there to conquer. You basically want to use the minimum amount of force to capture that territory and stop them from fighting you back and then return to trade and peace. And so the concept that like guns and bombs and stuff are political weapons where you basically punch somebody and you're like, yield, and they don't yield, punch, yield, right? Like you're hitting them to get them to get the fight to stop, basically, right? Unconditional surrender or conditional surrender or whatever it is. You have conditions and punch, 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 negotiate, punch, punch, negotiate, right? That's basically what conflict is. That's why people say war is politics by other means. Punch, punch, okay, the leverage has shifted. And, oh, now you get punched back. Okay, the leverage has shifted back the other way, okay? So all of those tools that people think of as tools for coercing the other side offline, basically they all have to be completely reinvented online. It's like firing a gun underwater, right? This stuff just doesn't work online. Like you can't nuke online. You can't send Apache helicopters online. If a concrete example, if your wallet is stolen, physical wallet in front of a police station, a police person can, in theory, run after them, grab them, bring them back. If your cryptocurrency is stolen, that police person has zero. What are they going to do? Like launch some Interpol thing to track down some person in Turkey or like Moldova or the UK that stole the money? The physical force doesn't work in the same way.
It does. It strikes me that the physical force doesn't work. There could still be wars and conflicts, but it's also striking that these might be digital. These might be black hats and hackers and coercion to have a core dev flip and inject some malicious code into a major patch or something like this.
That's right. So it looks actually like what we have now, which is social war and financial war with this is all happening in the cloud and occasionally gets printed out into the physical world with assassinations and drone strikes and riots and bombings and so on and so forth. I'm not saying that like large scale wars like Russia, Ukraine, like never happen. Not at all. In fact, I actually think we haven't talked about China that much, but one of my projections for the future is a centralized East and a decentralized West. China and India are at different stages in their civilizational life cycle. This is something the Sovereign Individual, I think, is not like, I think Sovereign Individual is a good book, but it's not a global book. The counter decentralization, I think, is going to triumph in China, probably, at least over the medium term. And the counter decentralization, just like the Reformation, the counter Reformation, like Protestants and then Catholics didn't just accept that Protestantism was going to sweep. They had a counter Reformation against it. Similarly, we have the decentralization and the counter decentralization. And the counter decentralization, I think, wins in China, but it loses in the US. And that's how you get Chinese control American anarchy. But the thing is that means that like the large army is probably, it's possible that for some period of time, the largest army in the world is China's drone armada, which you just don't want to see that black cloud crossing the horizon.
Wow.
Okay. That I don't know if you've seen their factories and stuff like cranking out this, I followed this unfortunately.
Unfortunately is a key word there. It's terrifying.
Yeah. Well, the thing is also that stuff goes down. It doesn't just scale up, it scales down. It scales down into like assassination robots and other types of stuff, right? And so, very few, when you start thinking about that stuff, then you're like, okay, digital defense, the security starts in part with obscurity. It's not all of it, but stealth is important in war. That's why you have a B-2 stealth bomber and so on. That's why don't disclose location. That's why I use pseudonyms online. That's why I have a secret state, an encrypted state, a distributed state. That's why, actually masks in public, it's actually good that they exist, right? Basically, that's saying like the internet is an untrusted environment.
Yeah.
Have you heard that before, the untrusted network? So, it's complicated, but basically treating your startup society as the high trust zone and then zones outside that as potentially bad lands, I think will be common in some regions of the world. It already is, okay? But I think more common in some regions, and in other regions there'll be surveillance. And we want to build kind of that third region, which is the sort of liberal, free society you have today where people can walk around without a mask and without like their shotgun and whatever, but also without the surveillance drone of hovering overhead. So rather than American anarchy or Chinese control, can we preserve this sort of, pretty decent life that we have now?
I think
or not just preserve it, but build a better one.
That is the hope. And that's certainly the hope of crypto. I want to get to one